So let me ask you this: any advice that you would give to audio engineers today? What are some of the ways that they could get better at what they're doing, even though the live industry has kind of faded for a season? What advice would you give to upcoming audio engineers in order to get better at their craft, better at what they do, even during these times?
Hire me to train you.
I love it. Yes,
There it is.
There it is, man.
I mean, that's part of what I do. I think aside from that is definitely listen to lots of music and like really listen. Try, it's tough because on the one hand, I don't want, when I'm talking to guys about it, I don't want you to necessarily tear it apart, but you have to kind of get a sense on what's going on. One of the main things that I'm working with churches on, or just anybody when I'm going in to train them, is just the overall balance of things. And that's one of the things I hear when I listen to online streams. It's just the balance of everything isn't off. And it's real easy, I think, when you're in the same location, you're working with the same musicians all the time, you kind of get this impression in your head. It's like a template of what is this all supposed to sound like? Because a lot of times I go in and I just make some little balance changes and people go, oh, that's exactly what we were going for. And it's like, yeah, you were close. You get accustomed to it. And sometimes that comes from, some pastor 7 years ago made one comment about turn this thing down.
Yeah.
And it's been buried in the mix ever since. And that guy's not even on staff anymore.
Yeah.
He's long gone and it's all changed out. So, listen to music, listen to your board mixes. I find so many churches these days, they don't have any kind of setup to record their board mixes. And sometimes it's hard to judge tonality and how that really is working because things don't always translate, but you can listen to that and get a sense of the balance and what's your balance like. And these days, if your stuff is streaming, you should be going back and listening to your stream as long as it's not hyper limited. I usually try and record, just the raw kind of left right feed off of the console if I can. But I know on a lot of gigs that I go into, there's just no way for me to even do that because they don't have a setup for that at all. So I would say that. And then the other thing is virtual sound check. Virtual sound check is just huge in getting better. The thing about mixing is not a technical discipline. It's a craft. If anything, it's a musical discipline. And all of the guys in the band, they can all go home and rehearse and practice and get better. I mean, that's how I learned to play guitar years ago. It was, you sat there and you would woodshed. If you're a mix engineer and you don't have a way to woodshed, you're not going to get better very quickly, especially for churches where you've got volunteers and maybe they're serving once a week, once a month, twice a month. The whole 10,000 hours thing probably has been busted, but there's definitely some truth to that. And if you think about
you still got to put the time in.
Yeah. How many hours is if somebody is only serving, let's say once a month, in a year, they're on 12 times. That's nothing. How many hours of experience is that? So finding ways to kind of increase the amount of time that you actually get experience, I think that's huge. And having something where you can do virtual sound check is a big deal. And if you don't have that, even if you can just multi-track it, take it home and throw it in a DAW and just experiment and mess around. There's some things are easier to learn in an environment where the acoustics are much more controlled. So, maybe a really good pair of headphones at home is going to help you a lot more than being in a really reverberant live space, especially for things like compression and understanding what attack and release do and things like that. Sometimes I know a lot of live guys who have told me they didn't figure it out until they got in a studio because the room is smearing so much of that, it's hard to kind of lock your ears on it. But once you get a sense of it, it's easier to go back into that kind of wet, reverberant environment and tweak it and make it work for you. So,
No,
and you can
Yeah.
just hire me. So
yeah, no, that's
I
all
do a lot
great
of
advice.
training.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
to master any craft, it really does take time.
Yeah.
We had this world-renowned concert pianist that was attending our church, and this guy, they came to the States so he could build his United States career and start building a following, because he would sell out cathedrals in Europe all
Okay.
over. Just really super high-end pianist. And his son was learning at the time, and he was, I think, 8 years old. His name's Simeon Mulder, and fantastic little kid. He would just run around the church, and he's so excited about all the tech and stuff, and you hang out in the sound booth and everything. But after school, every day he went in the choir room and he was on that piano for 3 hours.
Whoa.
And there was times I'd walk by there and I'd hear him just going over 2 measures for over and over and over again, just to get that spot on perfect as he was learning a piece.
That's
and I
incredible.
always think about him because we always want to get to the end game quickly. I mean, we live in a fast food society. We want the end goal.
Yeah.
But it really does take discipline and practice to master any craft. And in the early stages of my career, I'd sit down with a multi-track with a venue. Avid Venue is what I cut my teeth on. And, I'm like, well, what does compression do here? So I would spend weeks just playing with it to hear what it does.
Yeah.
And I'd turn my screen off and just kind of mess with the knobs. And, and being nowadays that we have digital consoles, it's so easy just to screw everything up, and then you just load a file and you're back to where you were. So, it's easy to learn. You just got to put the time in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the practices that and both of us came from the studio world, so we kind of understood what everything did. So when we went to the live world, I feel like that is an easier transition at times versus the other way around. I think they can both work. But then being on staff really gave us an edge to be able to get more of those hours in, where you're just putting those hours and getting those reps and over and over and over and over. And one of the things that I implemented is I never trust what I did last week. Not to say that I don't think it was good, but it's like, I'm not going to assume that every decision I ever make in my life is 100% bulletproof. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to be like, man, maybe I didn't hear that right last week. Even though it's the same chain, same drums, even maybe the same drummer, I'm going to double check things a little bit and just kind of maybe start from scratch and A/B stuff and that sort of thing. And I think it's always good to check yourself before you wreck yourself, just to, quote Ice Cube. So what? Yeah, no, but Dave, where can people find you if they want to check out some of your articles? I've seen videos of you with Wave plugins several times. You're also on other podcasts and that sort of thing. So where can people find you?
The easiest place to find me is my website, goingto11.com, and I've got articles up there. If you want to get help, I do a lot of consulting, and sometimes people like bringing me in to talk about audio stuff because I don't sell anything. So I don't come in with an agenda to do that, and people like that, and then I can refer them to vendors that they can talk to and build relationships with to do that, because that's the other thing I encourage is build relationships with your vendors. But goingto11.com, best place to find me, get a hold of me. I'm on social media, FOH Dave on Twitter, FOH Dave1 on Instagram. That's
somebody beat you to the punch.
No, it's a long story. I think I told it. I do a podcast now, and I think I told the story in an episode. It's not as the fact that there is a story is probably more amusing than the actual story itself.
Got it. What's the name of your podcast?
It's the Going to 11 podcast.
I love it.
So go listen and find that story.
Yes. And
It's on there.
a couple of things that
Somewhere.
were brought up before we end
Mhm.
our time. Virtual sound check was brought up. A lot of equipment was brought up. If anybody listening to this, if you have any questions about that, we know exactly how to get you up and running for that. Feel free to reach out to Michael, to Todd, to myself, and we can get you the right information for your setup in order to be able to accomplish those things if you're interested in a virtual sound check setup, or even any other audio information that is relevant to that conversation. But Dave, you have been an inspiration to me personally. No joke.
Cool.
No joke. Like that,
That's cool.
and your articles and even your posture towards, somebody you didn't even know, and allowed to ask you questions, to reach out to you. You've always had a great temperament and approach to things, and I have benefited greatly from it. So thank you for being a part of our podcast.
Cool.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point, to maybe talk about something else. But
Cool, man. Like lighting.
Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about lighting.
No, we won't. That'd be the shortest conversation ever.
On off.
Yeah.
We turn the lights on and we
They
turn
go
them
off? Okay.
Yeah. Don't most people worship with their eyes closed anyways?
Yeah, they do. So it doesn't even matter.
I'll just say more haze. That's
That's
the
what I
answer.
do. More haze,
More
more
haze.
praise. More haze, more praise. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
More
Well,
haze.
Dave, thanks so much, man.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks,
Yeah.
man.
Take care.